How about those Bobcats? Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bobcat Outsider, the YouTube channel that brings you Bobcat football from a fan perspective. I'm your host, Shane Driscoll. And if you have not been living under a rock, you just saw the Montana State University Fighting Bobcats absolutely demolish the Griz. And I'm so excited to report on that in this week's episode of the Bobcat Outsider. Congratulations, boys, on beating the number 3 team in the country, your fiercest rival, a team that is still in the top 6 seeds in the tournament, despite the fact that you beat them 48-14 points. Guys, you really showed that you are an elite football team. The closing betting line on this football game was 6.5 points for the Griz. Obviously, the Cats blew that line out of the water, demonstrating that they should have been the favorite in this football game. The best player in this football game for either side was sidelined with an injury. Now, I know that Akem was sidelined with an injury too, but I don't think that there's any argument that Troy Anderson makes the biggest difference on his football team compared to anybody else in the conference. Montana State returning all-conference corner Greg Filer did not play in this football game. And you guys still straight up shellacked the number 3 team in the country. So in this week's episode, we're going to do a little bit of a rewind, and we're going to talk about the predictions that people made before the game. Usually I just do myself, but I want to talk about the coaches too. And we'll talk about, and then we'll revisit those predictions and see how people actually did on them, including myself. Then we'll talk about how the game went, my favorite moments and standout players. We'll do a summary of the game, talk about the outcomes, and a little bit of news around the conference. Because the Cats will not know their next opponent until this coming Saturday, we are not going to go into the scouting report and talk about players to know and stuff like that. We're going to keep it to this past game and just kind of recap. Going into the break, I may not make a video next week. It just kind of depends on how things go with Thanksgiving, if I have time to do so. So I may or may not have one. If you want to be alerted in case I do make a video or produce a video, so be sure to subscribe, and then there's a little icon that looks like a bell. Click on that, and then you will receive a notification when the next video comes out. First up, the rewind. This week I want to share what the coaches said leading into the football game and talk a little bit about what I thought about it and see how that held up in the football game. This week I want to share the coaches' pre-game evaluations as well as their immediate reactions following the football game. Here's what Coach Choate had to say prior to the Cat Griz matchup.
We've got 2 ranked opponents that I think represent the best that this state has to offer on both sides. Really impressed with the job that Coach Houck has done in year 2. I think he's clearly addressed some issues on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, what I see is a bigger, better offensive line. And I think that has allowed them to be more balanced. You look at their statistically, rushing for more yards per game than they did a year ago. I think the Knight kid, number 21, is a good back. But I really think it's their commitment to being more balanced on offense and the improvement of the offensive line. I think Coach Strimmer's done an awesome job with that group. They went out and got some guys. But they're a year older, a year more experienced. So as I said, they're a bigger, more physical group overall. And I really think that that's helped them to balance their offense out. Defensively, I think Coach Bear's done an awesome job. They're a really difficult defense to prepare for because of all the pre-snap and post-snap movement that you get. I think that, I think Jesse Sims is having a really nice year. I think that kid's playing really well, number 37. Their linebackers are really good. I mean, I think that's the heart and soul of their defense. And they use a lot of them, kind of depending on what the down and distance is and how they're trying to attack you at different moments. And so, he kind of always is going to go through the Olsen kid, 33. I mean, he's one of the things that stands out to me about their defense, and I think is if you're a guy that really understands defensive football, you can really appreciate this, is they pursue the ball very, very well. I mean, this group runs to the ball. They tackle well. But even if they miss a tackle, the eraser is always effort, and these kids play really hard. On all 3 levels of defense, I think they're very sound. They're very, very high blitz percentage. whether they're bringing 5-man pressure or what we call bogus pressure, where they're bringing a guy off the ball and still only pushing forward the quarterback, about 70% of the time. So you're going to get an add-on blitz almost all the time from somewhere. And I think that's something that's challenging to deal with. If you want me to describe their defense, they play hard. I mean, they create problems for you with the movement and the pressure, but at the end of the day, they play hard. And I think if you're a defensive coach, that's what you want people to turn the tape on and say, man, this group plays hard. And they've got our respect and our attention from that perspective. Special teams, I think this is the best return group in the league. I think the combination of Jerry Lou McGee as the punt returner and then the Flowers kid, number 19, as their kick returner. I think those guys create a lot of problems for you, and they're very dynamic. Both of those individuals have touchdown returns this year, and we've got to do a great job of keeping the ball away from those guys, and when they get it, we got to swarm and tackle. And then, the Purdy kid's about 75%, I think, on field goals on the season, and their coverage units are good. I mean, these kids, I know Coach Houck takes a lot of pride in the special teams units, and you can see that coming out through film. So I think this is a very, very good football team, much improved over a year ago, and I think deserving of their ranking. And we're excited to host them here at Bobcat Stadium at noon on Saturday.
It sounds like Coach Cho had already put in a lot of preparation and had a lot of respect for his opponent. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the video or audio of the Houck press conference to share with you, but I have the quotes and I'll share them with you now. From Houck's opening statement, this is the closest thing that you could say resembled a statement about Montana State. It's a big game and we're going to try hard to win it. When Houck was asked about getting up for the game but not getting too high for the game, he said this: everybody knows who we're playing. When asked about MSU's offense, I've watched mostly the kicking game so far. I've spent the last 24 hours on the kicking game, so they're doing a good job there. They've got good specialists. They play hard. And that is what I would call the only positive thing that Coach Houck said about the Bobcats. When asked about MSU's league-leading rushing offense matched up against U of M's league-leading rushing defense, Houck said this: we were kind of in a game like that last week, where there were some similarities. A little bit later, he said, you got to be able to run the ball, and both sides are going to try hard to do that. When asked how difficult it is to prepare for a team that has so many running backs, Houck said, tackle the guy with the ball, right? When asked about preparing in case MSU uses Troy Anderson more or another contingency, Houck said the following: yeah, I don't know. I mean, they aren't going to give us their game plan, so we'll try our best to try and prepare for any eventuality. And if they play one guy more at quarterback the whole game, we'll be ready for it, whoever that is. If it's 15, then we'll be ready for him. When asked about the difficulty of preparing for a team that can be so multiple in the run game, and I want you guys to listen really closely to this one, Houck said the following: well, if you asked me that one in 1995, the first time I saw some of this stuff, it was harder then trying to figure out how to stop it, just from a numbers standpoint. There's nothing real new that we haven't seen for the last 24, 25 years. A lot of people are running a lot of quarterback run stuff. When asked about MSU's defense, Houck said the following: they'll pressure you a little bit. They'll man you up some, mix some fronts, like to bring their corners some. That's it. End quote. Okay, now this is just my take now. At face value, Houck has respect only for the Bobcat kicking game. He clearly lacks respect for and focus on MSU's most important strengths, their rushing attack, and their defense. I considered subtler ways of putting this, but I decided I'm just going to be frank with you. When Bobby Houck says this stuff, he's just trying to make it sound like the Griz are really important and the Bobcats are kind of an afterthought. But when you get beat on your home field and then stomped when you come to Bozeman, your narrative starts to wear thin. And make no mistake, the Bobcats' line play was physical and dominant, but the biggest disparity in this football game was coaching. Let me share one more quote from Coach Choate.
What levels the playing field so much in this kind of rivalry?
That's a good question. I mean, preparation.
From the first play of this football game, I thought that the storyline was going to be the fact that on the first defensive play of the game, the Montana State Bobcats had the exact same result as they did on the last defensive play that they ever played against the Grizzlies, being the stand in Missoula, or the stuff, if you want to call it that, or the miracle in Missoula, where Derek Marks recovers a fumble. The same guy recovered it, Derek Marks. I thought that that was going to be the first story of this football game. But as I started to reflect on it, I realized that the first and most important storyline in this football game was that the Bobcats were going to be more prepared than the Grizzlies because the Grizzlies weren't as concerned with the Bobcats as the Bobcats were with them. And that's a narrative that Bobby has himself to thank for. Here's what I said going into this matchup. Let's talk key matchups. The Griz have a really good offense, both running and passing the football. The Bobcats have shown that they can stop both threats pretty well. It'll come down to how that Bobcats D-line handles that new and improved University of Montana offensive line. I still give the D-line for Montana State the edge in this one. I think they're just playing at an elite level right now. But the one wild card is Dalton Sneed and his ability to get the ball out quickly and to evade tackles, which we saw last year in a number of near-miss would-be sacks. Looking at the Cats offense versus the Grizzly defense, the Griz have been probably better at stopping the run than anyone the Cats have seen so far, and the Cats have been a better running team than anyone that the Griz have seen so far, so that will be another important matchup. And finally, against all intuition, and again for another week, the probably most important matchup is going to be not a strength against strength, but a weakness against weakness. Montana State's passing game not being a cream of the crop type passing game, that's the place where they can exploit the Grizzlies the most, as the Grizzlies are giving up much more passing yards than they are giving up yardage on the ground. So the Cats did actually win the battle in the trenches more than I expected. I expected it to be a little bit closer than it was. I expected it to be a much more of a brutal kind of slugfest back and forth. But I'll give myself credit for that prediction because I still gave the Cats the edge on both sides of the line of scrimmage. The passing game, however, did not end up being nearly as important as I expected. And that may be partly due to the fact that Tucker Rovig connected on a long, I think it was a 40-yard pass early on in the football game. Here are a few selected high points from my perspective on the 119th Brawl of the Wild. I loved that on the opening kickoff, Flowers actually advanced the football out of the end zone and ends up getting tackled on the 14-yard line. I love the fact that the Grizzlies had a delay of game before the very first snap of the football game. Guys, don't huddle on the sidelines between the opening kickoff and the first snap of the game. The smack. Jacquay Allen comes in and absolutely levels Samori Toure, knocking the ball free, and Derek Marks comes up with the football. Mentioned that earlier, but that was a moment that was very much a high point for me. I loved how both the Bobcat offense and defense were a step ahead of the Grizzlies at every point through the course of this football game. Isaiah Ifanse back completely to his fully healthy self, shaking Grizzly tacklers off his back like water off a duck's back. Especially his two runs where he shook 5 to 7 tacklers off. There's one moment near the goal line where no fewer than 4 Grizzlies sped right by him as he put on a little spin move. The beautiful heat-seeking tackle by Ty Okada to stop the Griz on their 4th down attempt. I loved the Bobcat defensive backs completely dominating the Grizzly receivers. They knew where the ball was going to be at every moment. There were so many beautiful pass breakups. There was even a play where JoJo Henderson knew where the ball was going to be, but the receiver hadn't even turned around by the time the ball got to him. JoJo batted the ball down, but he didn't even really need to. It literally would have hit him in the back. 6 sacks on Dalton Sneed. 0 second half points for the Grizzlies. 382 rushing yards against the top rushing defense in the conference. I loved that Choate went for it on 4th down when he was up 41-14 in the 4th quarter. And I love that even after running up the score, the Bobcats were still able to get in their backups. We had Bauman come in at quarterback and Lane Sumner come in at running back after Lane had not played at all in the football game because our number 1 and number 2 guys were doing so well. The fact that they were able to do that and still kneel and take the victory formation at the end after running the score up, that was really impressive. The Bobcats won this football game from the coin toss. I mean that literally. They won the coin toss. The crowd went wild just hearing that. And it was from that point on, the crowd was in the game, and the Bobcats won every single moment from there on out. If last year was the miracle in Missoula, this year was the beat down in Bozeman, and I want to give credit to the R&R Catcast for coining that term. Here's what Coach Cho had to say after the football game.
Montana this year has generally been the more physical team, especially last week. They really were. You were more physical, period, in every facet all day. Why were you able to be that today against that team?
That's who we are every week. You guys probably don't watch us very often up in Missoula. Every week we are. Every week. So, watch us a little bit more. Get us on Root Sports a little bit more. You might be able to find out, Maybe we're not that bad. But you're not the team you were yesterday. You're not the man you were yesterday. And so this was all about living in the present, doing what we had to do to be successful today. And you get nothing for being the most physical team last week. And I'm sure Bobby would say the same thing. It was all about, settling it between the white lines. Like I told our guys, you want to win this thing, you got to control the four corners between the white lines. And after that, you can control the four corners of this state. And so that's what this was about.
He got a little feisty toward Ryan Tutel of ESPN Montana, a guy who he does his work out of Missoula, but he's actually a really good guy, and he's not that hard on the Cats. I know sometimes it can feel like the Cats get too much criticism, but he's a pretty good pundit over there in Missoula. And let's hear from Bobby Houck.
Good day for them, bad day for us, certainly. They beat us in all three phases, and they played really well. They gave us some stuff we didn't expect and capitalized on it. We did not play well in any of the three parts of the game, and it's a bad day to do that. Certainly, this game has import. It's important to us as well, and feel bad that we had a bad performance, and ultimately that goes on me. I failed getting our team ready to go today. So, I've coached in this game. I've been around it a long time. I don't know if I knew the answer to why. Certainly, we wouldn't have had that kind of performance, but I got to do a better job.
Oh, wow. It sounds like Coach Houck is being really humble and being a good sport after a tough loss. Let's listen to a little bit more.
You see the reaction at the end of the game here in the stadium. This game's everything to them. Their sole focus is to beat us. Maybe we need to start doing that ourselves.
Oh, there it is. Coach Houck is continuing a narrative that cuts against his own interest, that the Bobcats came more prepared because they care more about the football game. Here's the thing. I said that earlier the storyline from this football game was that the Cats came more prepared because they care more about the football game and that Bobby Houck has a big hand in that narrative. That doesn't mean that I believe that narrative at all. Make no mistake, this guy prepared this team to the best of his ability to come in here and beat the Bobcats, and it wasn't even close. This is clearly an attempt to demean the Bobcats and their blowout win over the Grizzlies, but that shtick is beginning to ring hollow. Again, what you say about others says more about you than it does about them. Out of this football game, the Bobcats earn themselves a 5 seed in the tournament. The Grizzlies are seeded number 6, and the Bobcats will play the winner of Albany versus Central Connecticut. The Grizzlies will play the winner of Southeast Louisiana versus Villanova. The Cats and the Grizz are on opposite sides of the tournament bracket, so the possibility remains out there that there could be a national championship that pits the Bobcats against the Grizzlies. That's highly unlikely. This season, the consensus is pretty much that it's North Dakota State and then James Madison and then pretty much everyone else after that. So it remains to be seen. Obviously, stranger things have happened, but that would be an exciting matchup. The Bobcats, if they win their first round game, they get a second chance at either Sac State or whoever Sac State plays. Sac State will be obviously the favorite in that football game, them being the number 4 seed in the country. The Bobcats land 13 players on the all-conference teams, 5 on the first team, including Troy Anderson at that linebacker spot. One person I want to kind of point out, that a guy that I've just been rooting for his whole career, is Josh Hill. He's been one of our best linebackers, and somehow he's just never gotten the credit for that. But he's on this year's first team, all-conference team. Congratulations, Josh Hill. I think that you absolutely deserve this. Somehow people aren't seeing you making a million tackles, taking that trigger point and making a decision instantly and getting there and making the play, making the surest tackles in the conference. But hey, clearly some people are seeing it, and congratulations. A couple of coaches have been let go from their positions. Technically, Tim Walsh at Cal Poly has retired. Obviously, after a down year, speculation is going to abound that he's been pushed into retirement, but he has moved on from Cal Poly. Ernest Collins Jr. from Northern Colorado has moved on from his position as well. And I just want to take a second and speak directly to the players and the coaches of the football team. We as Bobcat fans, as alumni, are so proud of what you guys have done. And we're just thankful to have people who can represent us so well on the football field and off the football field. All right, that's it for me, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving and go Bobcats!